Welcome to White Belt MMA. As you can see, we're not in our traditional stomping grounds. We're going to try to make one work here on the fly. I'm a little under the weather today just because I had a little bit too much to drink last evening. And a toddler touched me with some nasty boogers, so probably caught something from there.
Coincidentally,
as well.
I'm dealing with the same thing, but I'm a week into my cold shower regimen and I'm feeling great.
Oh, William Hoff. I really need to get on that because maybe I'll be... Wim Hof? I thought it was William.
I think it's just Wim. It might be short for William, I don't know. But there are also a number of people who are into cold showers, cold therapy, cryotherapy. He's not alone.
Right.
But well, he definitely influenced me.
Okay. I'm gonna have to look into the literature on the cold showers.
Our boy Armando is 3 days in right now.
Yeah. He likes it?
He loves it. He says it's too soon to tell, but
right.
He likes, at least if nothing else, that his showers are shorter.
More time to watch MMA.
That's
because
right.
of how freaking busy all the
That's right.
the scheduling that we have to watch.
And the whole litany of combat sports that we're going to get into today.
Absolutely, if we even have time to get into it. Obviously, there was a UFC card this past weekend, UFCNashville. There was also a Bellator card. There was an LFA card. There were so many different cards, and it's starting to get to a point where you need a lot of money to watch combat sports. If you really want to follow, if you don't want to be a casual, if you don't want to get ratioed on Instagram or Twitter and get called out, you really got to be paying a lot of money. And I think that we're running into an issue. And now with DAZN, jumping their price up to $20, it's going to be really tough, and you got to make some decisions, especially if you want to get the flow grappling and the flow wrestling. I don't know how you feel about it all. It's
they're doubling the price, which is, years ago when Netflix did this, I left Netflix. The only reason I still use it is because my mom has an account. They were trying to give you the same product for double the price. Now, arguably, DAZN is not giving the same product. At the time, Netflix was, but now Netflix has expanded their library. DAZN is not only expanding their library with commentators like Robin Black doing a whole ton of stuff, and I love his stuff that's on the free content as well, like on YouTube and his Twitter and Instagram. I'm fun. Liking and commenting on almost everything.
Yeah, he's fun.
But they've also signed big name boxers as well.
Canelo, GGG.
Yeah, that's right. Triple G.
So is it the same content if they're giving you all these big names? Like, they're adding to the content, obviously, but it's all about value, right?
Well, the thing to be considered is that the way that they booked all these big names in the first place is by paying ridiculous amounts of money to these people.
Right.
Triple G is not making less than 10 mil on any of his fights.
Yeah.
I know boxers typically make more than MMA people, but that's a lot of guaranteed
income. It's definitely a little bit more than the usual, for sure.
So ESPN recently re-upped their deal, has the 7-year contract now instead of a 5-year contract. All pay-per-views for UFC events have to go through them. We've seen all these in-depth interviews heading into the main event of the Nashville card. I was watching interviews they had with Pettis, had with Wonderboy.
It's great content.
Phenomenal. And it's $5 a month for just the normal package.
Sure.
$6, there's a margin of error there.
Of course, yeah.
In any event, we also still have UFC Fight Library, which is $9.99 or
Fight Pass.
$10.
Yeah, that's right.
So Fight Pass still has
Fight Pass
less
gives you
way.
a ton of content, though. Like smaller promotion stuff.
Do you think? Yeah, it has the Lethway, it has the Titan FC, it has the eBay, CJJ,
it has a ton of stuff.
The historic UFCs.
Yep.
I originally, when I first was getting back into MMA, because years ago, back in '09 and stuff, I was into it, but I was more of a casual. This time I wanted to be historic, so I watched like all the beginning UFCs before I went into the recent stuff.
It's great to watch like the rise, like the archetype of a fighter, like how they go from like their first fight to where they are then. You like follow the path. You can go back and do that with any fighter you want, which is like phenomenal.
Discipline, when it was originally one discipline versus another discipline, and then people begin being multifaceted in their disciplines. Even if they lean towards grappler or striker, they become multifaceted in training the stuff that otherwise it'd be like a dogmatic religion where you don't see necessarily Christians studying Quranic texts and Muslims studying the Rig Veda and Jews studying Nietzsche or whatever it may be.
Sure.
So it's nice to see the jiu-jitsu people studying wrestling, the wrestlers studying the Muay Thai people focusing on traditional martial arts and boxing and all of that. But between Fight Library and the ESPN app and DAZN and Flow, Do you have any favorites, or are there some things you like in one app that you wish another app would adopt, or anything like that?
You almost have to get the ESPN Plus and Fight Pass, just because, for me, you always want to watch the best talent. And I think there's a reason why NBA is more popular than NCAA basketball, than European basketball. You want to watch the best guys, because a lot of these guys are great in other promotions, and then they come to UFC and they're not great. And that could be a litany of reasons. It might not be the talent. It might not be like the actual fight that they get, booked into. But at the end of the day, the top talent is in the UFC, and you want to watch the top talent. So for me, I have to pay for that. I have to watch that.
Agreed. It's a point that we can elaborate on later in further detail, but when we get to the main event, Pettis versus Wonder Boy, one of the most interesting things is that Showtime Pettis has had a pretty bad record before going into this fight. Something like 3-6 in his past 9.
Always entertaining, though.
Always entertaining. And the thing you have to realize is that he came in as a WEC champion, lightweight champion.
Yeah.
And so he's fighting champions and contenders.
I don't really think that WEC is as a separate promotion. I know that they're just like it's practically the UFC, because the UFC just took all their champions, and just like gave them the title. Like Jose Aldo was gifted the UFC title. He was the WEC featherweight champion. He didn't fight for the UFC title. They were just like, you're a WEC champ, you're now the UFC champ.
I think Brett Okamoto from ESPN was saying that the fight he'd like to see next, looking ahead a little bit, is Showtime Pettis versus Jose Aldo at 155. And that would be his last fight before he retires.
Would be fun. Although I saw some rumors on Canal, which is I think like a Brazilian network, that Jose Aldo might be out of UFC 237 with some sort of infection.
I hope not.
Completely unsubstantiated.
Yeah.
But it could happen.
You gotta pray that he starts taking cold showers right now.
Oh man, stop! This we love spreading pseudoscience when we don't know if it's science yet. We love that, but it's okay.
Hey, it's well documented in sports.
Yeah,
it's just the extent of the benefits aren't as well documented, and they're slightly debated. But there have been rigorous scientific studies that cold therapy of various forms, ice baths, cryo, and cold showers, have health benefits.
I'm open to it. I think it's probably doing similar things that sauna is, in just the opposite end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Just bringing inflammation down, which is just always the bad guy. Inflammation is the bad guy.
The number one killer. Wim Hof actually calls it one of the terrorists, along with PTSD. Yeah. Especially awesome. When it causes depression, PTSD, suicidal thoughts, whatever it may be.
No, when you get fat, when you eat a lot, your body's building up inflammation. That's just what's happening.
Affects your sleep, everything. Yeah. But so I think starting with UFC.
But back to, I wanted to just briefly touch the thing that we were talking about earlier with the prices of stuff.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I know that ESPN can keep it relatively low, and that's just because they can take the losses early before they have those subscribers, before they reach a point where it's profitable. I'm sure it's profitable now, but they can take those losses because they're such an established brand. And DAZN is thinking that they got to get the money now because they're paying out these contracts. They got to get the money now. They're backed. I think it might be Vivendi or something. I think it's Len Botvinnik, the Russian billionaire. So they have money. They have big money. Yeah, they have big money behind them. But their philosophy might be to be making money right away, whereas not taking losses. So I see why the price is getting raised. I'm not happy about it, but I see the why. And I just don't know if I'm going to continue being a DAZN. I'm going to have to, in some way, watch the fights, but I don't know if I'm going to be a paying subscriber.
Wink, wink.
Yes. Yeah. No, we're paying. But yeah, I did watch that Bellator card this past weekend. It was low key. It was almost like I forgot that it was happening. I had to, the day of, I was like, oh shit, there's a Bellator card tonight. I had to adjust my plans to fit it in. It was Georgi Karhanian, I think I'm saying that right. And he trains out of the garage. OC with TJ Dillashaw and
Cub Swanson,
all those guys.
Aaron Pico,
Archuleta, the Spaniard. So he's solid. And we actually watched Georgie at the High Rollers BJJ
live
downtown, where he had a super fight against Jeff Glover, the pipe layer.
For those of you who didn't know, the High Rollers event was the cannabis-infused gi submission only BJJ
somehow
event.
Related to the Diaz brothers, which makes sense. They had some sort of connection there.
Nick was there signing stuff. Eddie Bravo was there. Eve Edwards was there. Mickey Gall.
Yeah. Anyway, but he was the main super fight on that, so I had recognition from him there, and obviously he's had a lot of fights.
He lost that fight. In the gi, but he did lose.
Of course.
And Jeff Glover got an ounce of wheat.
Oh yeah, that's a nice win. But yeah, Georgie's had a really long career. He's been great. He's more of a wrestling / jiu-jitsu base. He's not really a striker. But he's fun to watch. He's exciting. He always is going for trying to do work on the ground. The guy he's fighting is a stud, Manuel Sanchez. So I was excited for that main event. And it ended up kind of living up to potential. I don't know. Georgie kind of went for a lot of just control on the ground, and I know Sanchez wasn't too happy about it. He basically said at the end of the fight that he didn't come to fight and that he really just came to hold him. And it was debatable who won, but I think I would say that the correct decision was made and Sanchez won the fight. But you could make arguments for Georgie.
Yeah, and we don't have to repeat the arguments from last time about the merits of decisions.
Right,
I think the record will show what our opinions on that subject is.
And they had fought before, actually, and it was another kind of arguably one way or the other kind of fight. So those two will probably have a third fight eventually down the right.
Kind of like the Wonder Boy and Tyron Woodley fights. One win that's controversial, and then one draw that's controversial.
Right.
And the Till Wonder Boy fight.
Also, you know where I stand on that. That Wonder Boy won that fight, and it was in Liverpool, and they gave it to the hometown kid, in my opinion. But that's a whole different story. It was a kind of a weird fight for Sanchez because that's a perennial contender that was coming off a loss against the champion. He just fought for the title against Patricio. So it was like, what are you going to do with Sanchez now? You don't want to drop him too far down. They didn't really have an opponent for him. Georgie was in another promotion in Russia, and he was actually signed to them. And then they had a big falling out. There was like a fight after his fight in his last fight because there was a late hit, and he severed ties with the promotion. Bellator signed it back. He used to sign for Bellator. So it was like a lucky situation for Bellator to get a fight for Sanchez that made sense. It was a rematch. Now that Sanchez won, I don't really know what they're going to do with him. They might throw him in that featherweight tourney, which I'm super excited about for Bellator.
If he's in there, who'd you like to see him fight first?
I think they should start it with the winner of the Aaron McKee versus Pat Curran, which is going to happen next month. Aaron McKee, if you don't know, is that rising prospect with Bellator at featherweight. He's awesome, finishing guys in all sorts of ways. So I would love him to see the winner in that fight, and I think that might even be like one of the first fights of the tournament. It makes sense that would happen. There was a couple other fights that were kind of interesting on the card. I know Gerald Harris versus Anatoly Tokov at middleweight was interesting to me because Tokov is a beast. He trains with Fedor and just has like a monster. I think he's like 20-something and 2.
Similar style or no? That kind of judo base or no?
Yeah, he's definitely like good everywhere. You know, he's not like one thing over the other. But Gerald has had a lot of fights as well, and then he announced after the fight that he was retiring. So that was kind of like, he's kind of gone quietly, but he's had a pretty nice career, and I was like,
props to him, man.
Yeah, and he retired, and he almost won that fight. That's what was really interesting about it, is that he had Anatoly rocked, and it was the first time I'd seen him rocked in Bellator. I'd watched 3 of his fights in Bellator. He looked pretty dominant in all 3, and I thought if he won, you have to start thinking about him as a challenger for Musasi if they ever figure out the Lovato situation for Musasi. But or Machida, maybe you give him Machida next. He had a big fight, and
or a cross promotion with Vitor.
Yeah, so like I was thinking Anatoly's gonna be fine. He's gonna get through Gerald. Gerald's a veteran, but it's gonna be fine. But he hurt him, and then I don't know why he did this, but he had hurt Anatoly, and then like instead of standing and trying to finish him, he like went to clinch and bring him down. Yeah. And there's always that argument where if you have a guy hurt, just like try to finish the fight. I don't know if he tried from a distance, but like I don't know if he did try to do that. And Anatoly was the one that caused that to happen. I couldn't really see exactly what was happening, but it was kind of a strange move for me, and he ended up paying for it because Anatoly got the.
It goes to the point that I think has been made most prominently by Dana Herr, but a lot of people have made. It's that you can problem solve. Always, right? Chess is an analogy used for jiu-jitsu and fighting writ large. Sometimes Tyron Woodley on the ESPN cast was talking about 2 strikers in that way. As chess is used as an analogy a lot in fighting, but where it doesn't fit, where the analogy breaks down, is that in chess, you take turns. You wait for each other. In fighting, it's live. It's real time. It's the difference between a Final Fantasy type Square Enix game and the champions of NORAF game.
You're throwing
Real
too
time.
many references out here.
It's a difference between real time, a human being on the other end of the table, actively making decisions as you are countering your counters.
You can make an argument
versus
though
turns.
that it is turns, but it's moving at a much faster pace. Like there are turns happening, but it's so quick that you have to be up on
But
it.
the reason I wouldn't call it that is because turns in the strict sense of it. In a loose sense, you could say that, but in a strict sense, like in chess, you cannot move until the other person is done. So it's not even a speed difference. Like your speed is 0. Your velocity should be 0 when the other person's moving in chess.
Yeah.
Whereas in fighting, the velocity it could be anything. You can pause if you want and have a velocity of 0 to watch and observe, or you could go faster or slower than them.
No, I think you're making an interesting point there.
All that to say, you don't know, like, if the other guy wasn't moving, maybe he'd be good, but maybe his poor decision making, if that's what it was.
Right.
In the
We don't
moment,
know. I don't know.
is due to that.
Gerald could have been making a smart move, something he noticed, and he thought that he can get a clinch work and get it done. But I don't know exactly. I'm not in his head. Maybe I would have done it differently. I don't know. But overall, Team Fedor had a great night in Bellator. They had another guy, big prospect, Moldovsky, I believe his name was, Moldovsky. Another guy who is kind of a small heavyweight, like the 220, 225, 6'1", like very similar build to Fedor. I think he could have easily been a light heavyweight, but doesn't want to do the cut.
Not everyone would take that as a compliment.
No. But it really adds a significant speed difference, like versus anybody else. And he was fighting a guy who was coming up from light heavy to heavyweight, Linton Vassell, a veteran from England. And Vassell was huge. I didn't understand this guy made 205. He was like 250, so 6'4", 6'5". He's a monster guy. I'm like, I don't know how the hell you ever made 205. And he said he's done with 205. He's going to stay at heavyweight. He really liked nothing.
John Jones, similar height, makes 205. They say even easier now. Some people say
but I don't
without
think,
PEDs,
I don't think
easier.
John Jones is even close to 250. Maybe 235, but 250 is like...
On this card, on the UFC card, sorry, jumping ahead, we had Violent Bob Ross, who...
Oh man, I forgot all about that. We can just transition now if you want. I was like pretty much...
We can. The quick point I wanted to make, I wasn't super impressed by that fight, but the quick point I wanted to make was that he's 6'3", already looking skinny, or some say emaciated at 155, and he cut for 145, and he missed it actually.
By a lot. I mean, by a lot. Like usually they miss by like a half pound, but like two pounds is like 146 is the limit.
146 is a maximum you're not supposed to be, but the weight class is called 145.
I know, but I'm just saying how it would be considered.
And that's not 146 is not championship weight. That's only regular bout
absolutely.
weight.
You can't win the title on that weight. You can only be a regular fighter.
Correct. So 3 pounds over championship weight at the weigh-in, and in the ring, God knows how much you weigh.
The thing is, though, like that's always like people think that's an advantage in a fight when you weigh more than the other guy, but it's usually a sign that you didn't have a great weight cut.
Yeah.
And when you don't have a great weight cut, you're not feeling great. You're feeling like I am today. You're feeling kind of like under the weather. You're feeling like your body is like out of whack. And then you got to go into a fight. So it's like, it's a struggle to figure out. Obviously, he got down and it was difficult, but I don't know. I think he should go back to 155. I don't think he should do that again. I hope they don't let him. I don't want to say don't let him because he's trying to pursue an opportunity to make money, and I get that. I'm all about people getting their paper, getting their bread. But I think that it would be better if he was a 155.
So, do you want to jump back to anything we missed on Bellator?
No. I think it's fine.
Because there's a lot I could say about this one, and it didn't end in a finish.
No. And I was just going to continue on with this and just mention how much respect I have for Steven Peterson, Ocho Peterson.
Yes.
Fortis MMA. They fucking produce great guys.
You called it. You did.
On this.
You did.
And
that Dallas-Fort Worth area.
He took a ton of shots. And I don't know, okay, maybe that's not good. Maybe he should be not defending and not making sure he doesn't get hit. But he was tough, and he was not going to get finished. And he was like transitioning on a lot of those ground positions really well. He was like switching up on Luis a lot and getting top control a lot. And I thought it was a fun fight because it wasn't one style. You saw everything from both guys. It was moving all around. I would have liked there to be a finish, but it was a fun fight. I enjoyed it.
So Luis Violent Bob Ross Pena was
lighting.
That's why I said
Don't forget the violent.
was lighting up Peterson.
Yeah. At range.
At range. and Peterson wasn't having it, so he'd repeatedly take him down, not realizing that this is an AKA guy who's really good at not just wrestling but jiu-jitsu. An interesting thing that DC kept pointing out. Interesting to have DC, the coach.
He got
of,
took down
of
2 or
AKA.
3 times.
But
by
yeah,
Steven.
so he was commenting throughout the fight that instead of doing a normal takedown defense, what Violent Bob Ross likes to do is threaten with submissions.
Yeah.
So he would threaten with kimuras. He would threaten with a back take.
Off the cage, off
everything.
the cage, yeah.
He's always threatening submissions. So rather than just trying to prevent the takedown, he's trying to get.
Well, I think
submissions
that's
to
part of the
discourage him.
reason. Part of the reason why he gets taken down. He's not using the technical wrestling to stop your opponent from getting legs. He's going for an attack rather than defending.
And it's an interesting strategical maneuver
Yeah.
that he did. Weirdly enough, though, Peterson got Peña's back like 2 or 3 times and just wasn't able to finish. Each time Peña was able to flip around and get out of the situation. I mean, while they're standing, while they're on the ground, it was a lot of threaten, escape, and there were no deep submissions.
No, I agree. Although I think Steven was, a lot of times he was rocked, and he just did a good job of not showing it. He did a very good job of stealing himself. You know?
Call it chin, call it stamina, call it heart.
Yeah, but it's not. Sometimes it's not chin. Sometimes guys have chin, and like you can't tell that they're hurt, and like maybe they're not even hurt. Maybe they really just wear it. But Steven looked like he was hurt, but he was like standing.
There were a couple times that Peña was going in for the kill, trying to finish him off, and then he realized I got to back off a little bit.
Yeah.
And
I'm gonna receive something on the way in.
Yeah. He caught him with nasty elbows, like you said. DC was criticizing not enough leg kicks, and there weren't a lot of low, like thigh,
to be honest,
leg kicks, but he hit him in the head a couple times.
To be honest, I don't know, like, how comfortable Luis would have been, because he's kicking a smaller guy, so it's kind of hard to hit the spots. Like, the calf kick is hard to do against Steven when you're Luis.
Yeah.
Head kick, sure, body kick, yeah, but like, the classic calf kick, the low kick, is harder to do.
And to be honest, I'd have to look at the control that each of them had, but a lot of time was spent in the clinch. A lot of time was ground, cage,
I fucking
getting
love
in
that
a move,
shit.
get out of it.
I love clinch work. I think that like
It's
a lot
my
of people
favorite.
think it's boring, but like it's great techniques.
I would live in it. I live in it.
Yeah.
It's in, we are also basketball fans like Ariel Helwani is, who's begun commentating, right, for the NBA.
Yeah.
I would say it's the equivalent of people who appreciate not just offensive but defensive post work.
Yeah.
A lot of people underappreciate the sort of rebounding, blocking, and then just stopping of shots without blocking that goes on
Especially
in the
because the
post.
league now is a shooting league. It's a lot of that stuff is kind of disappearing.
Very
Yeah.
theatrical minded. So the 3-point shot is probably the equivalent to the knockout punch or the spinning elbow.
It's equivalent to stand up, I think. It's
Yeah.
like striking versus grappling.
So I think that's enough on my end on this fight. The one thing I'll say is the most amazing revelation, and this is something we had talked about before, I believe on the podcast, if not for sure off the podcast. For me, one of the most exciting prospects in the light heavyweight and middleweight divisions, I say this because he's fought at both. He claimed to be 5'7" on paper, but he's really 5'5". They announced that Darren Wynn has now been signed to the UFC.
And that was a while ago.
Yeah, but they re-announced it here on live in the broadcast, and they mentioned it because him and Peña live together. They've done interviews on Ariel Helwani's show
Peña
together.
is 6 inches taller than that guy,
and so many weight divisions, and he's in
like
145.
6 weight divisions below him.
He's 6 inches taller or more, and he's almost a foot taller. Let's say roughly a foot taller.
No, that's like
Just say roughly a foot taller. It sounds nice.
8 inches.
And he's like 5 divisions less.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's absolutely insane. But honestly, he's a guy who walks around at 5'5" or 5'6", 225. I'd love to see him fight heavyweight one day, but let him start off as a middleweight, as Chael Sonnen did, and then when he's comfortable, he could fight at light heavy and heavy, depending on
or
what
when he can't
matchups
do the
are
cut
on.
anymore. That's usually what
Or
happens.
when he can't do the cut, as he grows older,
Yeah.
he may not have the discipline, but he trained at the Olympic Center, like Kamaru Usman, like Ben Askren, like Henry Cejudo, like Daniel Cormier.
You just name it all, man.
Yeah, those are all top contenders and champions. So he's got a great regimen, and I'm actually more excited about his entering the UFC than I am about Violent Bob Ross. But the personality, the afro, the beard, the swag makes me still want to keep watching Luis
Right.
Payton.
No, I think that's fair.
Whatever he fights at.
Right. I hope it's not lightweight. At
Yeah.
least.
So there
maybe
was-
even welterweight. But speaking
Yeah.
of the clinch work stuff that you were
Yeah.
talking about, that was how Macy really turned the tide in her fight, and I think that was a fight I was super excited for. I know we're skipping a little bit ahead of the
No,
comments
no,
and
go
whatnot.
ahead. We jump around. We'll jump around.
Yeah, we might head back to the.
There's another girls' fight I want to talk about too. So go
Right,
ahead.
but this was, I think, on the main card, the
Yeah.
first fight. And Macy Barber was originally a strawweight, I believe, and then she was moving up in this one to
flyweight.
Flyweight because she was having trouble with the cut to strawweight, and she said she even
I
had
support
trouble.
it.
She had trouble with the cut to flyweight, and I was like, "Whoa, you been fighting a strawweight?"
Yeah, because they walk around at like 145, bro.
Yeah.
They say they're strawweight, but they're 145, 135. It's not healthy, man. Abolish weight classes.
Yeah.
But go ahead. I'm gonna let you finish.
I'll harp on all that for sure. And I thought that they were, just setting her up with like a relatively easy fight with flyweight. I didn't really do that much study work or tape work on JJ Aldrich, but I was shocked at how good JJ Aldrich was in space. And first round, it was demolished. Macy was getting demolished. It was like,
She's super young.
I know she's 20. I keep thinking about that. I'm like,
Super
man,
young.
Like, you can tell all you want about how she needs to be coached or how she should be listening to her coaches.
Yeah.
I mean, when you were 20 years old, like, I can't even remember what I was doing.
People were hating on Till for being young for his 2 recent knockout losses, and he's 24.
Yeah.
Well, some people said
Okay,
26.
but
I don't know his real age.
No,
I've heard
but
24 and 26.
24.
She's 20.
I can make 24. You have an argument for being well versed at that point, especially if you've had 20
Yeah.
MMA fights. Macy is like 20, and I believe the youngest active roster member of the UFC.
If she beats Shevchenko, she'll be the youngest champ, I think.
Well, she's the youngest, period, in
Yeah.
time right now. And forget the champ.
Yeah.
And she just did not know how to handle her. She wasn't as clean technically as JJ. Every time she went in or tried to get close to JJ, she got pieced up. And then she didn't have good technique at backing out. Like, JJ was phenomenal at doing a couple, 2 or 3 piece and getting out very clean. In and out, so clean on every strike. And Macy, it was like the classic difference between strength versus technique. Macy was significantly stronger.
And not just generic technique, but the point style fighting, getting in and out, so people don't get used to the combos.
Right, but it wasn't just points out. She was taking her head off. She 2 knockdowns.
Yeah.
She knocked Macy down twice because Macy kept falling backwards. Every time she got hit, she didn't try to strafe out of the way of a strike. When you fall backwards and you're getting hit, it's very easy for someone to just continue forward and continue to hit you. So when you're doing like this, that's not helpful to your situation at all. So Macy was having problems. I was like, oh my gosh, she's going to probably lose in this next round, and it's over. And then she changed up her style. She was way more aggressive in the second round. Started grabbing onto JJ when she could, when she got close enough, elbowing in clinch, getting shots in, and then the one thing JJ wasn't doing at all, she only threw jabs and crosses, and she didn't throw hooks. And Macy practically exclusively threw hooks. So she was elbow, and then a few hooks. She relented, went back up against the cage, and it was over. Macy won the fight in the second round. But if you had told me after the first round that Macy was going to win by finish in the second round, I would have laughed at you because of how it was going in the first round. So it was really interesting to see her adjust. Hopefully she took that coaching and she really went after it.
And that could be a theme writ large for the card, and we'll talk about that for the main event. But while you're on the subject of grappling women, you had Hill and Marcos. Hill, interesting, being the first Black American UFC fighter, as she says in her Twitter bio, versus Marcos. Hill, the classic striker, had said that she had trained her grappling a lot in preparation for this fight. Marcos, the classic grappler, straight up said she spent all her time in a Muay Thai gym this time around. And when you see them fight in the beginning, they exchange with striking. But what is a classic part of Muay Thai that we're just talking about?
Clinch.
The clinch.
Yeah.
So as soon as they got into clinch, Marcos goes back to grappling mode, gives her a hip toss, and that's going to be pretty much all she wrote, because they continue grappling from side control, and eventually she gets an arm bar. Hill fights for her dear life. Hill was fighting for her dear life, but it wasn't a technical escape. The escape was just, let me hold on for dear life, and eventually you're going to have to let go of that grip, eventually. She did
That's
after
smart.
some
That's
adjustments,
smart,
and it was a beautiful submission jiu-jitsu. So you got to see the stand-up wrestling takedown with a nice jiu-jitsu finish.
The judo. It was like Muay Thai judo.
Yeah,
Combo.
Jujigatami,
Yeah.
which is cross pinning. I took actually a Dana Hare seminar on arm bars, and one of the things he said linguistically or etymologically is that in Japanese, the Jujigatami or the arm bar, it's not just an arm bar. The translation is that it's like an arm hold or a perpendicular hold.
Right.
And so the idea is you can finish from the position if you want,
Right.
but if you watch Marcos, before she finishes, this is an MMA
She
match.
adjusts it.
She adjusted, not just adjusting it with the grappling, she adjusts it with striking. So it's also similar to Dean Thomas, the coach of Tyron Woodley, the jiu-jitsu coach from ATT, who says that the jiu-jitsu he teaches online is jiu-jitsu with strikes, which goes to the CJJ or the combat jiu-jitsu I love. She's holding the armbar, and as Hill is stubbornly not holding on for dear life, Marco says, okay, you're going to hold on with two hands. There's nothing protecting your face. Thwack to the face, thwack to the face. So then she has to protect
Very
the face.
technical terms, thwacks.
Very. I love onomatopoeia. And so then when she goes to protect her face from the thwacks, that's when she pulls on the Jujigatami or the arm bar
And it's
or
all
the arm hold. And so you see it's not just a pure submission, but it's a hold because she can't get out of it. So it's the same thing as a pin in NCAA wrestling or in pro wrestling. It's a way of holding someone in a place that they don't want to be, and the idea is to control them. And only when you know you have control via the strikes and the grappling, that's when you go for this finish or the submission.
Right. No, I think that was a fun one, and that was a great little finish. It was a great little armbar.
And Thug Nasty, Mitchell versus Moffitt. Anything you want to say about those boys?
That was a great fight. I think it won fight of the night. If I look back at the bonuses, probably deserved. It was an interesting fight. I love the Wolfman. I love Bryce Moffitt. He trains out of the MMA lab with all those boys down there, and he's just good
Is that
everywhere.
New Mexico or Arizona?
Arizona.
Arizona.
Yeah, it's Sugar and Campino and all those guys, and Benson Henderson.
Yeah. One of the people Pettis beat early on.
Right.
Twice. Off the cage, kick in the
Twice.
face.
He
In
beat him
WEC/UFC.
Yeah. Anyway, Bryce is fantastic jiu-jitsu. Really good. And he had his last fight against Chaz Kelly had that controversial finish where it was anaconda choke, and the ref thought Chaz went out. Chaz didn't go out. Chaz even thought about peeling it. I don't know where that went, but I thought Bobby was great, and I thought tough matchup for him with Bryce. I think Bryce is undefeated. Both good everywhere, both good jiu-jitsu. I was really interested to see where it would go. And I think, did you think that was the correct call?
I think it was, and for me the most impressive thing was that there was a very tight darce that Moffitt had early on.
He loves darces and
against,
anacondas.
Bryce Mitchell.
That's like his move.
In fact, in the post fight interview, Mitchell was talking with the crew upstairs, and he was saying that he was training all camp waiting for the darce, and he said, this guy's not going to darce me. And then he found himself in the darce.
Well, that's
and
smart that he was training for the darts, because that's what Bryce goes to every time.
100%. Just like RDA was training with Edwin Najimi that we
Right.
talked about in
Right.
preparation of the Tony
For
Ferguson
Tony,
fight.
yeah.
So he's training his whole camp waiting for the darce. He thought it wasn't going to come because he thought it would be too obvious. Sometimes the most obvious thing is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
He gets in there. He said he thought about tapping multiple times, but thinking about his mom, who doesn't even watch him fight, who doesn't support him fighting, but the way that she raised him in Arkansas, which was a big theme in his post-fight interview, the first one, he said that helped him through, and he fought through, he found a way out, and then continued, and he didn't just survive, right?
Right.
This wasn't like last time when we were talking about Leon Edwards holding on for dear life, or Hill holding on for dear
Right.
life. This was a man actively trying to win after almost being finished, and it really makes you lightheaded when you get in a darce.
Of course.
It makes you.
If you don't know,
have
you should
blood
go to
choke.
a jiu-jitsu class and see how you feel after getting darts.
Let someone darce you.
Yeah, and see how you feel.
Yeah, and then imagine trying to come back. So thinking about the willpower and the technique that it
Usually,
takes to come
if
back.
it's pretty
I
tight,
respect that.
Usually, if it's pretty tight, and I'm in a guillotine, anaconda, darts of some kind, and I'm in it for a long period of time, I usually have a hard time getting my bearings afterward, like having to sit down, needing a glass of water,
Yeah.
let alone thinking about having to fight. It's a different thing.
It takes a lot of heart, and I'm going to give you another great reference. I grew up listening to a lot of different underground hip hop, as you know, and the fans will get to know over the time of this podcast. So if y'all know XZ, he's a rapper out of Wichita, Kansas. And one of the big things that he imprinted in me was that even though I'm from LA and I grew up in LA, he's from Wichita, Kansas. Everyone said he had to leave Wichita if he wanted to make it big. Yeah. He made it big, and XV's still out there. XV's still out there making music.
It big is
he's making a living for himself. He's he's not Drake, but he's living on his own terms, and he's supporting his family, and he didn't have to leave Wichita.
That's great.
Bryce made the same point. He said he trained down with Jocko Willink and Dean Lister and Victory MMA in San Diego. Wow. He went all over to many different camps, but everyone kept trying to recruit him and said, you're not going to make it in MMA unless you leave. But every time he goes back to his home camp in Arkansas, and we've seen that, as you said, he's been an undefeated fighter. He's come back from crazy Dar strokes and other fights that seem
is he the guy that had
very impressive.
The nut accident?
He is. He had the power tool accident, and they had memes of him with a coon hat. Ooh. That's not a racial slur for blacks, but a raccoon hat and a power tool after his victory. Man. So they were hilarious memes. Okay. So to come back from that is another great thing. He said going forward, he wants to take a lot of time off and train and heal. And so he's not going to rush back into his next fight. So I'd say he's a great prospect to look out for.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I think that actually that fight was a lot closer than people think. Up until the third round, I think the third round is really when Bryce kind of pulled it away, and I think that you could have made some arguments for Moffitt, but it's probably fair at the end of the day.
Yeah, especially by threatening a submission.
Yeah, no, of course, he had him in trouble, and you have to really factor that in.
Yeah. But which makes his escape that much greater. Because the greater the trouble, the greater the escape is. Whatever value you attribute to it, the escape is that much greater. And the ability to fight on. Relating it to boxing, it's like, yeah, Deontay Wilder knocks down Tyson Fury twice, but Tyson Fury gets up and wins the round. And that's what's impressive.
Sure. Although, I don't want to get too into that, but there's the whole things about whether the time was up before he got up.
Yeah, you know, the simplest thing about that is that there's no objective rule. And we've talked about, you know, when we refer to the whole MMA or combat sports industrial complex of experts as quacks, one of the issues is the uniformity is not going to be there because it's going to be contextual. And there's always this debate in every field, not just combat sports, but in every field about the value of, as you grow as an organization, between standardization and then having case by case. In religious settings, it's the great value or idea, or even in political debates, of justice versus mercy. And in this context, that referee is the one who has the discretion about the count, and the way he was counting it out is what goes, not what people do with their timers outside of it. You could then maybe censure him.
Could you make an argument for automation at a certain point?
You can have the robots replace us, and maybe they're better, but maybe there's a human
I'm playing
element.
devil's advocate here. I'm not really
yeah, the devil definitely needs a lawyer, but you know what? I think there's always going to be a human component, whether it's creativity, whether you make up a platonic idea of the soul, whatever it is. I think there's always going to be something missing with AI, but I'm definitely open to the idea. Sure. I'm not a Luddite, so I do believe that we use technology, and if we use it right, it can help us and benefit us.
Absolutely.
Let's go to the co-main event and the main event.
I think so. I think that's a good move.
Blades versus Justin Big Pretty Willis?
Yeah, it's really hard to imagine because Big Pretty cuts weight to get to 265.
Which is insane.
Yeah.
And another reason for the absolute division that I always request. Open weight's the only
I love that idea just because Juan Adams, the Kraken. I want him to come in at 300 and nobody gives
versus Big Pretty at 300. Triple threat match. Throw Derek Lewis in there and Ngannou.
Yeah, but so to imagine a 266 guy, we don't know how much he is in the ring, and Curtis is tossing him around.
Curtis, though, not the lightest man in the heavyweight
Curtis
division.
Maybe
he's 260. Okay. He weighed in at 262.
Sure, but he's grabbing another guy that weighs probably more.
Correct.
And throwing him around.
Remember the leverage too. Big Pretty is shorter Curtis is taller.
It's tougher to go grab.
About 4 inches.
Go grab Justin. And there's a couple throws that they weren't just like single leg or double leg takedowns. They were like, he was lifting him off the ground.
He slammed him, I want to say, about 3 or 5 times. I actually tweeted it. So if you look through UFCNashville hashtag, you'll probably see my tweets live during the event.
Yeah.
But I think it was about 3 to 5 slams. 2 of them were soft.
Yeah.
Interesting enough, he broke the UFC heavyweight record for takedowns in that match, which was previously held by another great wrestler in that division, Cain Velasquez.
Wow. I don't think I caught that stat.
Yeah, it's an amazing stat, but some of them were forceful, some of them were light.
Right.
All of them were controlling.
I love to see Curtis versus Cain. Next, if Cain fights again.
You read my mind.
Yeah.
You read my mind.
Yeah.
Maybe I prompted you with
Yeah,
that
no,
stat.
I was thinking, trying to figure out like who would he fight next. And
So he called out JDS, Derek Lewis, and Stipe. Stipe would be his favorite because that would give him a title contention if he wins that after.
I think, yeah, sure. I don't know if Stipe will take any fight but the title right now.
It's true.
And I think JDS, the only fights that really make sense for JDS are either a title fight at some point against Cormier or running it against Ngannou for the #1 contender. And then you could maybe even do JDS Stipe 3 because they had 2 fights already and they both went in opposite directions. So you can make those 3 cases for him.
You can make any of the fights. I would like to see that the Blades versus Stipe, just because Stipe has been the least active of all the people we named.
Because he's offended at the situation, obviously.
And Derek Lewis pulled out of the fight they were supposed to have in January.
Right.
But yeah, simply in conclusion, the co-main event were 3 rounds of utter domination.
Right.
Big Pretty trains
Do
at
you
a
think
place
Curtis
of
should have
wrestling.
tried to finish more?
You know what he did, and he talked about that again with Tyron Woodley, and I'm forgetting her name, but the other host in the post-fight interview. He said that there was one moment in the 3rd round where he was going to let Big Pretty up so that he could try to finish him from striking more, and then he realized that it was too risky, so he continued his strategy of double leg, single leg, stand-up clinch.
I can
and
see
take
that
down.
because of what happened to him again with Ngannou. I can see that.
Habib style, wrist control,
Right.
pound,
Legs,
pound.
yeah.
I would answer your question by saying I think he could have tried to finish more, but the way he would have tried to finish more, that would have been safer. And this belies my bias as well, but it's my bias because it's effective. Submission grappling.
Right.
He had him in several times with 1 or 2 hooks in and wrist control, and he chose to ground and pound, which got him points and gave damage to Willis.
Versus
and
going for
also
a rear naked or something.
versus going for the lion killer or the rear naked, or going for an arm bar, or I mean, you could go anything. Dars, headlock.
Yeah,
There's so many submission grappling moves that are available to you. You can do what's the Eddie Bravo move? It's like the crotch ripper where you have the leg split.
A banana split?
Yeah, the banana split.
Yeah.
He could have done that move too.
I think that, it goes back to what you're saying about him being safe, and I think that's really what he was nervous about another Ngannou situation where he felt like he got screwed and it was like a second.
And I don't even think Willis has the power of an Ngannou, but just to take that option off the table, and especially there were moments where Willis was talking about Curtis Blade's mom. Like it reminds you of some of the shit talking gone wrong. It reminds you of people strikers getting manhandled by a wrestler. But what makes this worse is Willis ahead of time was saying that his wrestling was better. And he's hanging around with Darren Wynn. He's hanging around with DC. So you almost want to believe him.
I was going to make this point when you were talking about Pena being at AKA. Just because you're at a gym that specializes in one thing doesn't immediately make you good at that.
Agreed. But if you're talking shit that you are good
Yeah,
about
of
it,
course.
then you better back that shit up. But
Right.
in this event, actually, in Adamic fashion, Curtis Blades renamed Big Pretty Big Titty.
Oh, wow.
And
That's
he was talking mad shit. But he saved his shit talking till the end after he showed it with his work.
Right.
And I appreciate that.
Sure. And, it's funny, it's like the complete opposite was the main event. It was like completely, it was like a finish.
All
spectacular.
respect.
Yeah.
Before and after.
Yeah. It was completely different.
No shit talking beforehand. Not even the little bit that you saw with Woodley versus Usman.
They just had respect. I think Pettis respects
All
their
respect.
work. Yeah.
These are 2 traditional martial artists, Taekwondo and Karate. Robin Black made the point that there's very little distinction between them. I'll make the distinction as a man who studied Taekwondo for 5.5 years and as a
I think the
brown
distinction is
stripe
that
under Tony Yu.
Pettis will choose to engage more than Thompson does. Thompson is a much safer fighter, where Pettis.
Oh no, I just meant generically in the arts, not even them as individuals.
Okay.
Black was saying that they're the same thing. Karate is a little bit more punch oriented. Yeah. Both do punches and kicks. Taekwondo is almost zero punches. I remember
speaking from your experience in Taekwondo.
Yes, I remember fighting in a Taekwondo tournament, and I landed about 20 punches on somebody, and it was 0 points.
Right.
It psychologically damaged them, and I won the fight later with kicks, but they gave me 0 points.
Right.
And my coach was yelling at me like, "Stop punching him!" And I was like, "No, there's psychological damage. You know, you grow up seeing Mike Tyson say he'll eat your children. You know that psychological warfare is a part of fighting." Jocko Willing talks about it a lot as well. In fact, he has a psychological warfare field manual. Yeah. But in any event, this fight was absolutely amazing. Both of them have the traditional martial arts background.
Who would you say won the first round?
Karate.
I know that the fight finished in the second, but who did you say won the first round?
Well, it finished at 4:55 in the second round. That's 5 seconds left. Right. Almost as amazing as the Yair finish of the Korean Zombie, which finished in like the last half second. I would say Thompson was winning both rounds.
Really?
And all up to the last point, Thompson is winning both rounds. And
so like exactly like Zombie versus Yair.
Yeah, but even more so.
Wow, I thought Zombie
even
was
more
really
so.
Dominating Yair, man.
Even more, and I watched that fight too.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is because they had totally different strategies. Right. Like you said, Thompson likes to be evasive. The Wonder Boy...
He's hard to figure out.
He's very hard to figure out. He has his hands down. He has a sideways stance. Yeah. He uses the underutilized side kick. And actually that side kick was his demise. I'm going to give you another superhero reference because there was a Superman punch used.
On a Wonder Boy.
Everyone in the DC universe argues about Batman versus Superman. For me... if Batman and Superman didn't know anything about each other and they randomly stumble upon each other, Superman is winning that every time. 7 days a week and twice on Sunday.
110 out of 10 times.
1,000 times.
Yeah.
However, if you give them time to prepare, Batman is going to win 9 times out of 10, if not 10 times out of 10.
I'm still waiting for the analogy that you're
saying. So the analogy here is that Pettis is Batman, even though he uses the Superman
I'm
punch.
Once again leave because I disagree.
So check this out. Wonder Boy has already lost to this camp twice with Tyron Woodley. If Ben Askren, who was coaching him, who's also in this division, I also commented this on Twitter, but now Duke Roufus has potentially 3 people in the top 10 in welterweight in the UFC.
See,
phenomenal.
I didn't want to get into that, but what I was going to ask this later is, what do you see? Who do you see them fighting next?
I'll get to that, but let me finish the analogy to make sure that it hits.
Okay.
So, because Duke Roufus as a coach has had all this time to prepare, and even though Ben Askren was involved with the NCAA wrestling, you know he was talking to Pettis. Yeah. And even though Tyron Woodley is commenting, and he even commented with Wonder Boy next to him, which shows the respect that they could have even after the wars and controversial wars they've had. Right. You know he talked to Pettis. All the preparation that Pettis has had and the losses, the kind of shaky record he's been coming off of, Pettis is Batman because he's had all of this time to prepare and game plan. And even with that game plan, you don't have a guarantee. So his game plan going into it is use the traditional Taekwondo he has. There's a moment in the first round where he does this flying wheel kick and Wonder Boy dodges it and he falls on his ass. And after, instead of trying to like jump on him and ground and pound, he lets him get up and they dap each other. And he gives him respect for the attempt.
Yeah. That's almost too much respect. That's too much.
Well, it's like the Anderson Silva versus Israel fight that happened recently.
That was partially annoying as well.
Yeah. But interesting about both of those fights is that even though it's MMA rule set, no one had even one attempt of a takedown.
Yeah.
Not even a single attempt of takedown. I thought Anthony Pettis might, because I honestly thought Wonder Boy's a better striker and he's bigger.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is, Wonder Boy was winning on punches. He starts from, like we said, hands down, and he's just way faster than Pettis. And he was landing way more than punches. He was landing more kicks, but Wonder Boy's kicks were to the head, to the body, to the legs, and Pettis's were almost exclusively to the legs, which you could say is tiring him out or making him at least rethink the strategy of doing any leg kicks to Pettis. So Wonderboy's winning for 2 rounds, and at 4:55, this is a point that people were missing in the Twitter sphere. People originally thought that Pettis jumped off the cage. One, because he became Showtime Pettis when he did it to Ben Henderson. Well, he did, but not with his feet. He did what I call a booty bump maneuver. So Wonderboy comes in, and I'll demonstrate this for the YouTube audience.
I don't think they can see with how much light we've lost.
But they'll see. Yeah. Wonderboy comes in with that underutilized sidekick that everyone does. Yeah. And instead, there are many ways you could respond to this.
I saw
many ways you could respond. You could go into it. In physics, they would say if you go into it, you get rid of the acceleration and the velocity, right? Or you could try to dodge it left or right, or you could try to dodge it back. Pettis does none of those things. He absorbs the full force of the sidekick and lets it take its natural momentum, throws him into the cage. From the cage, he uses his booty and his lower back strength, so like whatever squatting or endurance exercises he does, his lower body and back strength.
This is very scientific.
To bounce off of the cage. And from there, he does the Superman punch everyone says, and he changes it up by doing a very slight, not like an obtuse hook. Yeah, not an obtuse hook, not a clean hook, but a hybrid hook and back right hand punch, using the momentum of the sidekick from Wonderboy.
Phenomenal.
And he hits him precisely on the chin.
And it was over when he hit it with that. He didn't need any follow-up, I think.
He had, I think, 2 more punches from the round, and Herb came and pulled him away.
He was out.
Similar to Jorge getting the 2 extra punches on Till after the 2 weeks in a row of great, and you could throw this as another crazy stat or not, great Hispanic 55ers who move up to 170 to fight against the bigger striker that you thought was going to win.
Let's finish with pretty much this. Let's say that maybe Masvidal Pettis is an interesting fight at 170 if they're not
at 170 or 155. They're down for either.
I think Pettis, I don't know how long he is for 170. He probably might go back down to 155. I think he was just going up to 170 because it was an interesting fight. I think Pettis is at the point in his career where he's going to take interesting fights.
Agreed.
Because he's not really in title contention for stuff.
But nothing at 45, he says.
Yeah. So I could see the Aldo at 155 happening. I could see interesting big name fights for him. And for Wonderboy, I don't know where you go with him. He's going to have a tough find for an opponent at 170. It's going to be interesting.
I think there's still a lot of people in the top 10. Ponzinibbio could be a great opponent for him.
I don't think Ponzinibbio is going to take anybody outside of the top 5 because he's very entitled with his 7 straight wins. There's a lot of great fights happening at 170 with Dos Anjos and Kevin Lee moving up to meet him there. So there's a lot of interesting fights. That's like one of my big fights I'm looking forward to is Dos Anjos versus Lee.
And he was saying something recently about how he's just kind of taking orders from UFC because people were complaining about the matchups that he's been having.
Oh man, wrestler after wrestler after wrestler after wrestler. Corey Dos Anjos is taking these monsters, but at least Kevin Lee is probably more his size. I don't know. The other guys he was fighting Usman way bigger than
both candidates. I think, as we mentioned before, for that 65 division.
Absolutely, would love a tournament with them in it. Why don't you do that, Dana? Please.
Ben Askren and Khabib, I think, have played with the idea as well as GSP and for Haas's camp.
Yeah, and I think before we lose too much light here. Very excited for Gaethje Barboza next week in the super violence fight. Very excited to see if Gaethje can tactically figure out Barboza because if he tries to strike at range with him, it's going to be a bad situation. I think if Gaethje gets up to pressure, we're going to have a really fun fight.
Yeah, it can go either way. I'll make a prediction: Barboza by wheel kick or some other crazy kick. But I won't be surprised if the pressure of Gaethje overwhelms him. I won't be surprised.
How about I say Barboza by leg kick, TKO?
That's interesting because they're both leg kickers.
Yeah, I think Barboza by leg kick.
Gaethje's one of his most technical aspects. A lot of people critique his technique, but one of the most technical things he does are leg kicks.
Hopefully we'll get around to also covering probably one of my favorite events of the year so far, One Championship, with the debut of Eddie Alvarez and the debut of Demetrius Johnson. Both of them are fighting 2 low-key killers. Go look up those guys, Timofey and I know his nickname, the Little Piranha, the Japanese star that Demetrius is fighting is going to be a monster. And there's like 3 other title fights.
Gary Tonon's also on that fight.
Oh yeah, but Gary Tonon's a prelim. They got Ung La, the middleweight champion. They got, I don't know how the middleweight.
But he's one of the most interesting prospects for me, so I just had to call him out.
Gary Tonon's fight is going to be huge. They have like 3 title fights happening. It's a monster event.
He's fighting a Muay Thai killer,
and
too.
I think it might even be on TNT or Bleacher Report BR Live. So really awesome to check that one out. And tons of great Muay Thai fights and kickboxing fights happening on that card, as well as obviously KG Barbosa and that event happening. I still have to catch up on the NCAA wrestling championships that just happened. We'll probably have some stuff for you guys for that.
In the midst of it, there was a quick beef that we can mention between Bo Nickel and Ben Askren. Bo Nickel called Ben Askren out, and the head of Flow said he'll pay for them to have a wrestling match.
That's some Hodge level wrestling. I'd love to see it. I don't know if
it'd be great.
I hope it's folk style or freestyle. I don't know.
But Ben has said, because Dylan Dennis tried to call him out for a jiu-jitsu match, he said he's not focusing on grappling right now. He's focusing just on MMA. But
as
maybe after he retires, he'd be open to these types of matches. Maybe a CJJ, maybe a jiu-jitsu match with Dennis, maybe a folk or a freestyling with
just an
with
exhibition of some kind.
Yeah,
would be fun. But for now, I think that's great.
Yeah, the one last thing I wanted to say, just because we're always throwing it in, I know I probably said the word Lethway a million times. It's because I want to see a Lethway MMA promotion, and I do believe Rogan and Bravo are going to make it one day. I have faith, I have hope. But I saw
we're going to speak it to existence.
For real, for real. I saw a great KO this week just on highlights. They were clinch fighting. We talked a lot about the clinch today, and throughout the clinch, there were punches and elbows and everything thrown, but the one fighter head-butted the other in the chin.
We love that. Legalize it. Legalize
and he knocked him out, bro.
Yeah.
He knocked him out.
Legalize it.
Precision headbutting.
Yep. See you next week.